Parker, welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to our show, let's review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of each segment, I give my assessment of how we did at finding common ground and put in my 2 cents on the topic. As always, we have some interesting topics, and they're going to be even more interesting tonight because we have such a fantastic panel of experienced common ground panelists. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's panel. We have Emily Norton. Emily, great to see you.
Great to be here, Ken.
Thanks for being on the show. We have had you on many times talking about your work as the Ward 2 ward counselor. A lot going on in Ward 2, it seems.
Yes,
you're always
yes,
a
always.
hotbed of activity. And by day, you're the Massachusetts director of the Sierra Club?
Yes.
Any other important credentials we should be sharing?
Mom of 3.
And you, what committees of the City Council are you on these days?
I'm on finance again, and this session I'm also on public facilities.
So buildings,
Yes.
good stuff.
Yes. Buildings,
And
roads,
we might-
energy.
We might talk about something related to that.
Yes, we
Teaser,
may.
hint, hint, hint. Anyway, thanks, Emily, for coming on. George Mansfield, great to have you back
Great
on,
to be
George.
back, Ken.
George was, of course, the Ward 6 ward alderman before the name changed to councilor, and we served together for 18 of your 26 years, as I recall.
That's right. Good
So,
math.
yeah, well, no, I, so that, it's funny, when I first started serving, I thought you'd been there a long time, but only a mere 8 years prior.
Yes, I was really green then.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Anyway, and you're also, of course, the planning director in the town of Carlisle, and also very relevant to our topics tonight. And during your time on the Board of Aldermen, I think basically chaired almost every significant committee of the finance, land use,
Public facilities.
public facilities.
And congratulations on public facilities. It's a great place to be.
And of course, we're vice president of the board for a number of years, under more than one president.
3 different presidents.
Wow, so a vast array of experience. And of course, Greer Swiston, a former Ward 3 at-large alderman. And Greer, you are an active realtor, is it?
Real estate agent.
Real estate
realtor,
agent,
yep.
yes. And of course, during your time on the Board of Aldermen, you were on a number of committees. But what were your what were your highlights and issues in terms of what
Probably on planning and development and on public safety.
zoning? Yeah, right. You're right.
Yeah.
Sure, you were on the zoning and planning committee. Anyway, so let's dive into today's topic. So we've got 3 somewhat interrelated topics that deal with planning and development issues, coincidentally enough, George, right? And also the city operations and the environment are sort of our theme tonight. And also we will, at some point during the show, discuss our wish list. So this was interesting. So on the last show, we had some people were talking about what they'd like to see the new administration accomplish. So I thought what we'd do is every show for the first few months this year, have all the panelists sort of chime in on goals for the new administration. And then a few months in, we can just put a big list together and send it to the mayor and just say, well, here are some things that at least panelists on Common Ground would like to see accomplished over the next few years. And, and to her credit, the mayor is very organized and will probably remember that list. Even if she doesn't agree with it, we'll notate it and probably will send each person individually a note, like 3 years later. Here's what I did. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get to our first topic. Topic number 1 is no bid contracts. Now, there is a public bidding law in Massachusetts that requires, under ordinary circumstances, public contracts over a certain amount to be bid among, and then you take the lowest qualified bidder under most of these processes. Some types of contracts for construction, there's some discretion on the part. There's a committee. We have for example, famously when we built the new Newton North High School, there were 3 choices that Mayor Cohen had to pick amongst that were recommended to him, and but so you don't necessarily have to pick the lowest bidder, but there is a public bidding process, and that generates a list of qualified bidders. There are exceptions to that for certain types of services, including some types of planning services. And so we are currently in a situation where apparently there is a $500,000 contract for planning services that a vendor has been selected for without a public process. So I think we can sort of have a 2-part discussion. First of all, I want to ask the panel. I'm going to start with Councilor Norton, because Emily, of course, being a current member of the City Council, is knowledgeable about what this contract is and can sort of bring us up to speed on what's going on and what stage of the process it's in. But my question for the panel will be, first in the broader sense, is it okay to use these kinds of mechanisms, and if so, under what circumstances, no-bid contracts? And then I think we'll look into the specifics of this no-bid contract and see if it was a good idea in this case. So Emily, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening?
Yeah, so the planning department has identified a consultant that they want to work with to look at the stretch of Washington Street from about Harvard Street to sort of on the way to West Newton, a little bit in the middle of Newtonville and West Newton. The reason being there's a lot of development proposed by one particular developer for that area. Very large developments are proposed. So this is to look at the streetscape and the zoning and the traffic and what would make sense for that area, and do a process with charrettes and so forth to get input from the community. So in theory, it's not a bad thing to do, but in this case, there was no public process, there was no bid. It's a $500,000. I personally don't think that we should have to spend so much money to do that, number one. But
well,
even if,
I
go ahead.
guess just to focus in on the idea of a no-bid contract, what's the justification for not putting it out to bid?
So the planning department has felt that this really is this consulting firm. I don't agree with this, so I'm just giving you their take. It would probably seem more compelling if they were the ones making the case for this. But the argument is that this particular firm that they found has done great work elsewhere, and they're really uniquely qualified and suited to do this work.
So, and why is it that is it because of the type of contract that it doesn't need to go out to public bid?
So that is an excellent question. The argument I've heard is that yes, because of the type of contract and because of the speed that we want to work with. I am still digging into whether that is actually the case. So I'll just leave it at that. There will be a public discussion at the Finance Committee about that. We will be bringing in people who have this expertise.
So this hasn't been approved yet?
No, this has not. No, I was not the only one expressing concern about doing it this way.
So to be clear, there is a proposal of the administration before the City Council.
Yeah, and you should know this is not the first no-bid contract. Literally the week before on the Public Facilities Committee, we were considering a different no-bid contract for Newtonville for $380,000 to look at the various developments that have already been approved and make sure that
like the Austin Street one?
Austin Street, Washington Place, and make sure that the streetscape and the look are consistent. To me,
are the developers paying for those?
Nope, that it would be the taxpayers.
Who negotiated that deal? Anyway.
That didn't get approved either, so we're still looking at that as well. So I'm very concerned about spending our money this way.
So there's potentially then $850,000 that the new administration would like.
$880, yeah.
Okay, $880, thank you, that the new administration wants to spend on consulting firms relating to the Newtonville area planning, all of which would be paid for by taxpayers without any public bidding process.
Right, and that's not all the consulting we have going on around Newtonville. And those contracts, those don't buy a single bench or a tree or anything. There's also the proposal to widen the sidewalks in Newtonville, so that's I believe the same firm as the $380,000. Although got to remember that right. But anyway, there's a lot going on, and it's a lot of us want more answers before we move forward with any more approvals.
George, you not only in your capacity as an alderman, but in your current job as a planning director, must have some experience with no bid services contracts. I remember that in Newton we'd use these occasionally. I think there was a $50,000 one at one point. I don't remember anything on this order of magnitude. You were chair of the finance committee and the public facilities committee. You remember anything
No,
like
no.
this?
In that context, no. And in the context for my professional work, you have to understand. I work for a town that is, very much smaller than Newton.
You are the planning department, basically. You're the only planner in the planning department?
I'm the only planner in the planning department. But
And what do we have in Newton, like 18 planners?
Don't let my assistant watch this program. Anyway, that amount of money is large in my mind anywhere for planning services. $880,000, almost $1 million for planning services.
For one neighborhood.
For one neighborhood.
Neighborhood, not
Yeah.
for the city as a whole, but for
Right.
one neighborhood.
Right.
So maybe now you're getting down to close to Carlisle size. We're 5,000. What are you, about 7,000 in the neighborhood? Yeah. Anyway, I don't think it's illegal. It's certainly for professional services, and that's not just planning. That's planning, engineering, legal, anything that's considered a professional service rather than a commodity or something like that. Does not have to go out to bid, and does not require you to select the lowest qualified bidder. But there are some thresholds, and you should check into this, Emily. I know 25,000 is one threshold where I think you have to send out an RFQ and solicit at least 3 firms for qualifications for what you want to do. And
Does that apply to architects? And we had
Yes,
architects designing Newton North.
It applies to
We didn't have to
architects.
take the lowest bidder, but we did need we need a process.
Exactly.
We had an advisory committee. There was a very public and very controversial.
By the way, just so we're not throwing initials around, RFQ is request for qualifications. The firm tells you who they are, what they can do, but they also show you an example of what they think they're going to do. So you have a chance to look into that and make a decision based on that at least.
Right.
And they show you their portfolio of what they've done in the past often.
Will they ever?
They'll do a song and dance,
Right,
right?
right.
So, long answer short, this seems like a big number to you to do without a bidding or public process.
Well, without some kind of public process, right?
Okay, Greer, what are your thoughts on this?
I do not think you're going to get much uncommon ground here. Because I would have to say I have a lot of respect for our mayor, and I do know that she's trying to get a lot done, and I can only imagine that this was not there wasn't a public process out of not urgency, but the need to be efficient and just to get everything done. Because obviously with every public process, everything takes a lot longer. And I know that that's something that we complain about, the way the city works, but I think for better or worse, that's the way the city's got to work. You're talking about, this isn't a household of 3 people. It's not a company of a couple hundred people. You're talking about a city of 80,000 people. That's a lot of people to have to accommodate. It takes time for people to be able to respond to things, and you're talking about doing something to their city that's going to affect everybody. So I know it's frustrating. I know that we make fun of the government being inefficient all the time. I mean, goodness, I do that just because you can. But in the end, the process is necessary. I think the process is necessary because
So when you say
all
the
live here.
process, you don't think that the process that was followed here is
A
the process?
Correct. I'm sorry. A public process that does slow everything down, probably would not enable her to get this done within her 4 years of her term. Sorry.
Really? How long would that kind of bidding process ordinarily take? Maybe Emily or George has.
Shouldn't take more than 6 months.
No, but if you were to have a project, if you turn that by the time you get to the point where you're actually going to complete the project, I mean, how long have they been trying to develop that corner of Washington Street?
It adds another extender to the project.
Exactly. It would take years before it gets built, and which I think everybody knows that's how long it takes to get
Yeah, I
something
mean,
built.
we have a developer who is buying property, so that part, I think that's the key. The issue is that she wants to see a process go forward before, so that we can have some sense of what the neighborhood wants instead of going with what the developer wants. But the other thing I think it's important to keep in mind is that the the Newtonville Neighborhood Area Council has a process that they are putting
They're
together.
having a charrette coming up.
They're going to have a series of charrettes, so public meetings where people can come and weigh in. In fact, the first one is February 15th.
Thursday, a week from
Yes,
today.
yes. So
Isn't that the reason we have area councils, so that you have the local neighborhood being able to contribute and be a part of the I mean, the whole reason why, you know, borrowing Mayor Warren's a little thing is it's 13 villages, one city, right? Is that we have all of these.
I didn't know that was his little thing.
Well, that was no. He revived it because we were, you know, for years we were going to this, you know, one Newton, and you know, there was a lot of complaint about the dilution of all the different villages. Whether he actually contributed or not, he did make those little banners.
Well,
he made those
I
little
see.
banners.
He made the banners.
He made the
Okay.
little banners. He did at least put lip service, if nothing else.
Okay.
I actually think he did believe in it, but
Okay.
you know,
No, I just,
you know,
it
championing
may have
the
predated him a little bit, the
I-
concept.
No, well, the concept clearly predated him, that he embraced it.
Sure.
So yeah, so there's nothing against, you know, a developer's coming, why not have a sense of what people in the neighborhood want. There's already been a lot of development proposed and approved in Newtonville, so we've had a lot of chance to hear from folks in Newtonville. So it's not like we're starting from completely brand new, number one. Number two, we have a group of volunteers, very talented volunteers. That's one thing about Newton, that we are very fortunate with the type of people that live here and the qualifications they have. So we have this group that has stepped up to do the same type of work. And number three, we have this no bid contract. And it's like, why do we have bidding laws anyway? I think you want to avoid where, you know, someone's tapping their cousin for work. I'm not saying that happened in this case, but there's a reason that you have these public bidding laws. And even if in this particular case, because of how something is designed, you know, I guess design services
Well,
can be avoided. But, you know,
So just
as
to
a best
break-
practice, we should still put it out to bid. Maybe this is the best one, maybe there's not. We're in the Metro Boston region. I can't imagine there's not another firm that couldn't have done this
So
work.
just to be clear, there's a couple different public processes that an administration could choose from. There is the public bidding where you have a lowest bidder, and then there's the request for qualifications, the RFQ process, where you have people come in and say, we're qualified,
Exactly.
and you at least, and what I remember we did in Newton in the past is used a committee that was a publicly appointed committee like the Design Review Committee to look at the proposals, to interview, there were public presentations before we hired an architect
Right.
for this kind of money when you're talking about
Look,
big
if you
dollars.
were going to renovate your kitchen, you know, most of the time, that's a lot of money that you would be spending personally, right? You would
Not $500,000 on planning expenses.
It's a heck of a
no, but my point is that, you know, when you go, sure, you probably have a contractor that you've worked with that you like, but, you know, it's a pretty big deal. You probably call in 2 other people just to take a look. You may end up still going with your contractor, that the first one that you took at, but, you know, the other ones may have helped you raise some questions that you didn't think to ask. It's just never good to just go with one.
Right.
So, but to be clear, there are several different public processes, at least 2, that would be available, and so just to understand what's happening here, the new administration, the new mayor inherited a planning director and a planning department. Is this just a carryover of something that Mayor Warren was already doing, or is this an initiative of the new administration?
I believe, well, it's been communicated to me that it was initiative of the new administration, and that the conversations with this consultant firm didn't start until after Mayor Fuller's administration started. I don't know what other conversations I might not have been privy to, but that's how it was presented to me.
Okay.
The only reason I can see that see the reason for doing this is trying to expedite things, but I still don't think it's right.
I would be very wary of a firm that puts together a plan in less than a month, because that's what we're talking about, less than a month, of this scale.
How are we talking about less than a month? Is that what
Mayor Fuller's administration is only a month old.
Oh, that they selected the firm in less than a month, you're saying?
Well, they must have.
They've already met with them several times, even though no money has been
And when-
approved.
And in other words, the planning department has met
Right.
with the firm. Yeah, that-
3 to 4 times
But doesn't this,
as of 2
doesn't
weeks
this,
ago.
speaking of process, doesn't this have to be reviewed and approved by the city council?
I expressed some consternation at the finance committee meeting that all these meetings had taken place and all this work seemed to be happening as if we were, like, what are we here for then? You know, do we have no say? Why do we even get to, is this supposed to be a rubber stamp? No, we are supposed to be considering and then deciding yes or no
So it
whether
came
we
just
vote
to
on it.
finance, not to zoning and
Yeah,
planning?
and then the response was, well, you know, we haven't paid them yet. And I was like, well, they're paying attention to how many hours they're putting in, and we would have to pay them.
Has the administration signed a
spending money.
contract with them though?
Not, actually, I have no idea.
I don't think they can without the
mean-
council's
Well,
approval.
it would be good. That'd be a question you might ask.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Very quick question.
Anyway, it sounds like there's some common ground around the table that or as Greer put it, there is a lack of uncommon ground.
Pretty much.
I
I
know,
want
right?
to make one more point about this before we move on to the next topic, if that was what you're aiming to do, which I wouldn't blame you, is that, again, we have such incredible volunteers in Newton, or volunteer capacity. In fact, Mayor Fuller herself served on the Citizens Advisory Group.
I think she chaired that.
Okay, even more. So if she chaired that, which did a series of subcommittees, incredible reports.
She was the vice chair of the Blue Ribbon Commission, and then I think she was the chair of the subsequent, which some people were calling the Red Ribbon Commission for short, but which was also called the Citizens Advisory Group as its official name.
Right, and those reports that they put together,
Very impressive.
very
and
impressive and
professional.
very influential. So it's not like, oh,
Yeah.
we didn't spend any
And it was,
money, so it
And it
doesn't
wasn't
matter.
paid for by the
And
city.
it was
They
not
didn't
paid
cost-
for.
No, and
Well,
they,
it was paid for by volunteer time, but it was
Yeah.
Right, but there was,
different payment.
Well,
Yeah.
paid for by the
Other
volunteers
taxpayers.
with their time, and they may have been in one of them some printing expenses, or I believe that the city did pay some of the support costs. It might have been. I think we appropriated like $20,000 or $30,000 for the printing of these very impressive reports. Remember how thick those were, George? Handed out.
Right.
Where are they now?
they're still online, and I actually have reviewed, and particularly the school one, many times over the years. So, absolutely, it's just a reminder that we don't need to
And
spend a ton of money to
We've
get
had
incredible
we've had a number
services.
of task forces in Newton with really impressive people
Right.
involved. It's a good point. That's an available resource, and of course, as you said before, there's the area council in Newtonville that's got a process going on. So it is of some concern, I think, that the city isn't working more closely with the area council to support that effort. Perhaps maybe provide some planning resources and consulting resources to dovetail more closely with that.
Right.
And the area council is, of course, part of the city.
Right, part of
It's
the
not
city government. I should say the
public-private.
citywide government
Correct.
Right.
isn't, the area councils. Well, I mean, this was actually an issue in the recent ballot question. They were going to make the area councils essentially optional.
Oh, in the charter
And the
thing?
charter change, right? They were talking about making them creatures of the city council, and the city council could decide what their rights and responsibilities. Basically, take the requirement that they can exist
But
out
that
of the.
didn't pass.
That did not pass. Okay.
I believe there's also common ground at this table around that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, but we're not going to rehash that tonight because we've got a lot of other things
Though I
to get
wouldn't
to.
mind if you wanted to talk about it again. Actually, it has been docketed again, so.
Oh,
talk-
really?
mhm.
Someone wants to do the same thing?
No, the 8 and 8.
Okay.
So
well,
we can talk about that either tonight or another time.
another time.
Yeah,
Another
okay.
time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we'll have Rick Lipoff on.
Yeah,
I know
there
he
we
feels
go.
strongly about
Well,
that.
he's the one who docketed it.
Okay, very good then. The next topic that it relates to this first one. So and it was alluded to earlier, which is the Washington Street corridor has an unprecedented amount of development and number of properties under the ownership of apparently one individual or one company, the Mr. Karp's development franchise or business.
Korf.
Korf. Sorry, thank you. Robert Korf, is it? And so what I wonder about, and I want to ask George as a planner about this, is what are the pluses and minuses in the planning business of having a lot of properties under ownership? Apparently, he bought up that block just north of Washington Street, near the Walnut Street intersection, and has basically continued to buy a number of properties along Walnut Street. And of course, we were talking earlier that in the historical map of Newton hundreds of years ago, there were huge swaths of the city owned by one family. But in a modern, built-out, developed city, Is how often does this happen where one company buys up a lot of property, and what are the things to look out for? What are the concerns? What are the pluses and minuses associated with it? I mean, obviously there are companies that do this on the sly, right? When Disney wants to build a theme park, they have dummy corporations buying up all the parcels because they don't want people to know that their little bit of swamp is really very essential to a big theme.
We call it wetlands now.
Well, when Disney World was constructed, they were calling it a swamp near Orlando, just west of Orlando. So, that's why they got that land so
Actually,
cheap.
I think they still call them swamps in Florida, you know?
Yeah, right. And they still call them gators down there too, right?
Well, yeah, I would.
So I mean, we want to. I've rambled on asking the question, George. What are the considerations here?
Well, my experience in this area is at a far different scale. But developers do, it's a common thing. Developers buy up individual parcels that may be owned by different people when they have an idea of a development they want to bring forward. That's not uncommon, and it's less common, I think, in a city like Newton, which is a built-up but suburban city. It's probably more common in downtown Boston than it would be in Newton. And
You ever seen this before in Newton on this scale, though?
no,
You
not
chaired the land use committee for years, and
well. Yeah, we would see the results of that there, but no, I just don't. I haven't seen it on this scale. I've seen it historically in Newton when larger tracts of land were. But I mean, I think that's how they put together Oak Hill Park, for example.
a long time ago, right?
A long time ago.
Just after World War II.
Right, and large portions of Brooklyn were developed in this. Not Brookline, Brooklyn, New York, were developed in this way. So I read an interesting article I'll share with you sometime this week.
What are the competitive factors? What does this do to a community to have that much owned by one developer? Should we be worried about it, or is this just a good thing?
I think we should be vigilant about it, yes, very, very definitely, because although in general it's going to be, in Newton, it's going to be a kind of a mixture of zoning districts that these properties are in. There's probably going to be a request to zone them in a more common way and probably upzone them still for more dense development. And you got to be sure that you're not doing it one property at a time, thinking, well, we'll do it here, but that'll take care of the problem or take care of the need, whatever it is, when if you know that the same owner or a related company owns a lot of the other property in the area, because it's going to come back and you're going to see it again.
Greer, you work in the real estate business. Have you seen this? Have you had people say, I want to buy up a lot of property in that area, or have you seen, have you bid against people doing that?
I have not. I don't do a lot of commercial real estate. I mostly do residential real estate. But as George was saying, yeah, I mean, when you have really big money coming in, you're not going to buy a house for $50 million. That it's going to be a lot of property to put together in order to come up with a portfolio that's worth $50 million. And when you have large investors, so we do have that money floating around in the Boston area. We have a lot more investment trusts that are going around, and they probably want to buy up. I would have to say that there's pros and cons to it. One of the things I raised is when I was on the zoning and planning, we were trying to promote, these village centers, these mixed-use development, and a lot of the communities that we were comparing themselves to, the point was made that they are that way because they're owned by one. They were owned by one developer, and it was developed by one developer, and that was how they were able to make things happen that way. To have a community, a community center, that the village center, where there was both a community center as well as complementary services around. The one that I remember the most is Lexington Square. And they're saying, and it was pointed out to us, it's like, oh, see, how uniform the buildings are, and see how everything fits really well together. And oh, by the way, I don't know that it's currently still owned by the same person, but it got developed that way back when it was owned by the same person the whole
Interesting.
time. So
I want to ask Emily, you represent this neighborhood. Do people think this is a positive thing that one person's buying up a lot of the property? Gives more opportunity to work with one developer to get what the neighborhood wants? Are people
So I
concerned?
mostly hear
What-
concern. That doesn't mean that's what everyone thinks. It means that the people who have reached out to me, that's what they think. So I don't want to put it out there like, oh, this is what people are saying to me, and that's thus what everyone thinks. But it is true that those who have reached out to me are expressing concern. I think especially, from the comments we've heard, that when it's done right, if one developer is doing everything that people would like, then it's a wonderful idea because it's more of what you like because they've bought a lot of properties. The concern is, well, what if they have a vision that's not what a lot of people want? Then there's a bigger risk that more of Newtonville would be not better than what it is now for a lot of people. So I think that's the concern: is what are his plans, and what's.
And what is the city's role in interacting with a powerful developer like that has the leverage of a lot of property?
Right. So we do have the leverage that he is going to need special permits. So the question there is, how much are we going to use that? It's probably no surprise to anyone at this table, I wish that the city council had used more leverage to push back a bit more on some of the previous developments that have been approved. Because what happens is, you can look at this area.
Do you think there's still a threat of a comprehensive permit that the developer can come and say, if you don't do things my way?
He did try to threaten that before with Washington Place, and I never bought it. When you looked at the details of how long it takes, particularly how long it takes and how much money he had put, he spent almost twice the assessed value on the Washington Place property.
And when you say Washington Place, that's the stretch of
That's
Washington
where the
Street
Caroon
from Walnut
restaurant-
and like a block west.
Right.
Basically?
Yeah, it's where the Caroon restaurant was. It currently is just not open anymore. Over to the post office along Washington Street.
And including Newtonville Camera Building and that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Going
the same
back,
building.
that whole
same building.
block.
Yeah, the whole block. Yep.
But that whole block was already owned by the same. He bought that from one owner, so
Right.
that was already owned by one owner.
He wasn't consolidating.
No, but he's
Not
got
yet.
that. He's got, or is trying to get. I don't know the exact details. I haven't seen any paperwork. These are mostly things I've been told by reputable people. But the Rice Valley building, which is across the street, the Whole Foods, and then all the properties behind Whole Foods on Craft Street to the City Yard, the
Oh,
3-acre
wow.
lot
So it's
from
pushing in
the
both
Sweet Tomatoes
directions.
building in West Newton all the way to over to the barn, the Santander Bank building, and I believe the West Newton Cinema building. So it's a
So
lot.
It's going from
The
Nonantum
West
all the
Newton
way
Cinema,
down to
all the way. Wow.
all the way
That's-
down
yeah,
to
that's
really
the
the
It's
whole-
the center of Newton, of West Newton.
And those are the ones I know about. I know that there have been other requests
coming
that
your
have
way.
not so far
Well,
been.
presumably, if he's purchased them, if we went online to the assessor's database, we'd see the owner, unless again they're being
No,
bought
he's
through-
looking at them. You're not saying that it's gone through yet. He's looking at them. He doesn't own them yet.
So I believe deals are being struck, is what I'm being
Oh,
told.
okay.
I haven't. I'm going to be getting more details soon, but that's what I've. Yeah.
Oh wow! So these are
Of course, these are all private deals, and the public doesn't know what's
Right,
going
until-
on.
And has no
until
right
the-
to know.
until-
Well, he may be
until
buying
it's-
them on contingency too, on contingency of getting these permits approved.
Right.
I don't know the details of that.
So, but once obviously something is consummated, they file it with the Registry of Deeds, and it becomes
Once
right
it's
at the once
closes,
the deal is
right.
So I think that I think it's human nature to be very concerned when you see what just looks like a monopolizing action happening, and so I think that's why everybody's concerned. But again, I think it's more of a concern because we have already had initial interaction with this developer, and there's not a lot of comfort that this is a developer that cares about our neighborhood. And I
Yeah,
think
I mean-
if it was somebody that we were already, working with, and there are developers that we know that are a little bit more friendly to the community, I don't think there would be as much concern being raised.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
there would still would be. because
it's in
that's
the
just
eye
what
of the
we do.
beholder. There are some who are very excited about the plans for Washington Place, et cetera, and there are plenty of people who think that the whole area does need, an upgrade, that it's sort of run down looking and so forth. The concerns are that what's good for the developer in terms of profit is not necessarily good for the city in terms of our revenues. So
Right.
it must be, from the way he's so focused on residential and not commercial, he must make a lot more money doing the residential aspect. So residential just costs the
that's
city
a
a lot
really
more.
good segue to.
Our next point?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
excellent.
let's wrap up this topic. it sounds like there are some significant concerns about one developer owning that much property. I guess I'm going to, so I think there's a lot of common ground. I'm going to disagree a very small amount with one thing that Greer said, which is that, and I guess everyone kind of said, well, if they're going to do what you like, then that's okay. There is a part of me that worries that even if someone does something that you really love on a small scale, the power imbalance of a monopolist puts them in a position, even without any ill will on their part, that they try to extract a little bit more than they reasonably could.
Right, you make a bad thing out of a good thing.
Right. And no, I mean, this is true of companies. It's a great company. They get kind of big. They push their competitors out of business, and suddenly their prices are going up, their quality is going down. It's when you lose competition, and the city is forced to deal with a powerful developer, and I'm not saying that this is a bad person, or that even that necessarily the Washington Place project is bad. Anybody in any business who gets too big makes me a little nervous, and particularly when you're talking about a balance of power. You hear about this in small towns. Yeah. You read in the paper, like, there's one auto plant in this town, or there's one, and they extract
Mr. Potter.
Huge.
There you go.
It's a Wonderful Life, exactly. They extract your younger viewers. You're like, what does Harry Potter have to do with it?
Do you have younger viewers?
Younger than what?
Younger than us.
Watch.
Yeah,
sure.
Melissa's wrapped, I'm sure. Anyway, the question to me though is, at what point? And I don't know the answer to this, but at what point does that power imbalance become a problem for public policy making, democratic policy making processes on a local level? And there's been a lot written on this topic about local democracy and big utilities coming into a community, and powerful entities imposing their will on cities and towns, because enforcing things that people wouldn't otherwise want because they feel like they don't have a choice. Right. And I'm not saying that this I don't know him. I'm not saying he's that kind of guy.
Well, you're putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Just that level of power imbalance, that much owned by one developer, makes me nervous.
The point that strikes me the most of what you said, Ken, is the lack of competition. If it's commercial, whether it's commercial or residential, if you have one entity owning large swath of it in the city, there's no competition for
right.
The rents will all be the same. Whether they're store rents or residential rents, and
they can charge more because there's
you can't keep a diverse population that way, because everybody's got to pay the same rent. You can't keep a diverse business community, because the local businesses, the mom and pop stores.
I really think what we need to do as a city is I think we have very, very much been ignoring our landlords in our city. Okay, we have not been very friendly to a lot of our commercial landlords. We keep putting all kinds of zoning restrictions, making it hard for them to rent out their space. And I say this because I believe Ted Hess-Mahan used to be very much in tune with this, in trying to get those landlords to have a voice with the city, and we should be talking to them and asking them, how are we making their lives difficult?
Your former colleague,
My
Ward
former
3 counselor.
Exactly. No, I do know that he used to talk to them a lot, and that was one of the things that I thought was a good thing.
I thought he was for more zoning rules.
I'm not saying that I agree with what conclusions he came to, but he did bring that up before, is that we did not talk to our landlords enough, and if we talked to them, maybe we had a better understanding of why we are making their lives difficult. Because there's a reason why this guy can buy up all these, is able to cut all these deals.
Well, maybe because he's paying above market values.
He's offering a lot of money.
Anyway, we don't have that much time left in the show, and there's a lot left to get to. So before we get to our third topic, I want to just, as I said on our last show, we let the panel weigh in on this question of their wish list for the new administration.
World peace.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, and if the mayor of Newton can bring about world peace, she needs a promotion. But
you said a wish list.
Let me just give a few examples of some of the things that people brought up last time, then go around the table and see what folks want
Are
to
we
add
allowed
to
to
this
say
list.
we just agree with them, or we have to
You
come
can-
up with new ones?
you can-
What if
you
they
can-
had the list?
Well, maybe it is the list. Okay, so let me run down the list as best I can recall it. One item was treating city employees better so that there would be less turnover in department heads and other. And the metric to look at after 4 years was the rate of turnover. So that was one. Another one was the maintenance of our parks and open spaces. The example was Cold Springs Park, Exeter Trail. Things are falling apart. There should be better care taken of that. I think another was the amount of traffic in the city. That was
Luck with that
there was
one.
yeah, okay, fair enough.
I don't think that's in her control.
Well, no, but I mean there are there have been ideas about, for example, school transportation, getting more kids to take a bus, so there's less traffic around schools every morning. There are some, in fact, teaser alert. Steve Siegel will be on the next show and talking about that very topic. School committee, new vice chair of the school committee, Steve Siegel, has a plan for improving use of public
Stay
transit.
tuned.
Stay tuned, or don't stay tuned nonstop for an entire month, but tune in next month. Same bat channel. Now, let's see. What were some? Less energy consumption of city buildings. Let's just see. Better street maintenance was another one, and I think that's enough of a sense to. Why don't we go around the table, and then I'll throw in a couple more that I think were also discussed. So Emily, anything you would add to that list?
Yeah, I think I'd like to, I have high expectations that she will take a more robust approach to our unfunded liabilities. Newton
Oh,
alone,
OPEB, right. Yes,
Newton
sir.
alone, not just OPEB, Newton alone owes over $1 billion in monies that we have promised but have not set aside to our employees in the form of pensions and retiree health care, other post-employment benefits, or OPEB for short. While SETI Warren, to his credit, did start to make up that shortfall, we're nowhere doing enough.
Well, as a counselor, Ruth Ann Fuller very vigorously pursued and docketed the item.
Yeah,
to
well,
set
she,
up that
sh- yeah,
account.
she pulled together on her own accord, pulled together a committee that wrote a report on it, but then really nothing much happened from it. And the difficulty is that I can tell you, in 6 months of door knocking when I first ran 4 years ago, literally one woman on Mill Street brought up the pension and OPEB thing. So when people aren't clamoring for us to solve it, it's a really hard thing to solve.
It's so funny. I was just listening to something on NPR about global warming and the psychology of long-term problems. People don't want to deal with long-term
Well, it's
problems.
funny you say
They
that.
don't
When
know how
I'm
to do-
speaking, I spoke at Day Middle School recently about this, and I said the biggest issues I think for Newton are fiscal responsibility, or fiscal sustainability, and environmental sustainability. So
Yeah.
it's exactly, and I totally agree with that. That it
Yeah.
is a big problem. It's complicated. It's kind of scary. And if you don't do anything on it, no one will immediately notice and clamor for it.
And not only that, it means paying today's price for a tomorrow benefit. And I
Right.
think that's really difficult, because one of the things I said to Ken when he brought this up is, I think that in trying to become more fiscally responsible and trying to address these issues, which I do think that she has, because I've heard back, is it may be, orthogonal with a couple of the other issues that are on the list, because it means that we're going to have to cut some of the things that we've been doing.
Like no bid contracts.
Like spending $1 million in a no-bid contract. Right.
Yeah.
I'm reminded by the reference to the development discussion of another big issue and a big suggestion, quantifiable suggestion that was made on the last show for the mayor, which is to increase the ratio of commercial to residential real estate in Newton, because commercial is a rateable, helps fund great schools
Exactly.
and
It really
services,
does.
and that will
Residential
be
costs us money.
And
Residential
we've
is
been
the
treating
opposite.
commercial like it was the evil,
Right.
a grand evil, and I think that we have for years been making it painful to do commerce
So
here.
one thing we can look at in each of these development projects is, at the end of the project, do we end up with a higher percentage commercial or a lower percentage commercial than we have? And at the end of 3.5 years, when the mayor is presumably running for re-election, what has her administration accomplished on increasing the percentage of the city that's commercial? I think she's very much aware of this as an issue for fiscal sustainability. I
Yep.
had the opportunity to sit down with her for an hour around this table, and she seems acutely aware of it. And so, it's a tough battle to fight those powerful developers on this. So we'll see how successful she is at that. George, other things you'd like to add to this list?
Well, first, I agree with you on that last issue, but you have to realize that the push statewide, probably in some ways countrywide, but more on the East Coast, the push is for more housing rather than more commercial. The governor has recently come out with an initiative. It's not, I was going to say a new initiative. It's not a new initiative. The legislature has been looking at this now for several years of trying to, sometimes it's called reform zoning, so that there can be more housing and more dense housing and more, hopefully, more of a variety of housing built in the state, because the state is really in need of that housing. And a piece of land has got to support commercial generally or housing, or if it supports both, there has to be a percentage. It is a battleground, and it's going to be hard to do it. But I do agree that we do need more commercial in Newton.
If we look at the metropolitan area holistically, though, there's a much higher percentage of commercial in many of our neighboring communities than Newton has, which isn't to say there aren't also communities that are almost entirely residential, but those are not the more diverse communities. If you look at Weston, it's almost entirely residential, but it's not. If people talk about housing, the housing advocates aren't saying Newton should be more like Weston, I don't think.
No.
They're saying we should have a diverse array of housing options and more small unit rentals and housing for seniors to stay in the city. They're not saying, wow, we need more $10 million estates in Newton. At least I haven't heard anyone argue that.
But thinking about the question before we sat down tonight, that wasn't one of my measures.
What are your wishes?
Well, first of all, one thing when you were talking about what I was doing and what I have done, one thing you didn't identify, and I will now, is that I have served now since leaving the board for the last 8 years.
Newton
as a member of the board of the Newton Conservatives. And so I have to put a plug in here. I think I would like to see Mayor Fuller get to something that Mayor Warren didn't get to, and that is preserving our open space by specific actions, the most notorious of which is to somehow figure out how to preserve Webster Woods, either by a city purchase or a conservation restriction or some kind
And
of...
I'm not giving credit to our last panel. That was actually brought up on the last show as well. Great minds work in similar ways. That is one that a lot of people are concerned about. George, you're familiar with the open space plan. Are there other parcels other than Webster Woods that you think we should be using CPA funds or other resources?
I'm sure
to
there
acquire?
are. I'm not, don't have a list that I can identify right now, and I don't really want to do that right now because I think Webster Woods is the one that is most
That would be
important right now.
your top priority.
But there are others, and they don't have to be big parcels. Sometimes they're small parcels. On the Conservatives, we look at a couple of acre parcels that we try to make sure that they are preserved. But on a broader preservation tack here, I think that I'd like to see the mayor make better use of the Community Preservation Act, which the Newton taxpayer has been paying into now for a number of years, to really preserve the gamut of things that act allows you to, not just open space, but also housing, and I mean preserve housing as well as build new housing, and preserve historical resources, and specifically the historical resources, that is our village structure in Newton. I think we need to be looking very carefully at what we can do under the Community Preservation Act, but the mayor has to really initiate that. It's not a council initiation.
And so thank you, George. Before we get to Greer's wish list, I just remembered another big one that someone brought up last time, which is that hopefully this mayor will get ahead of the curve on what we need in terms of school space and start a process of building more elementary schools before we reach crisis proportions and have overcrowded even our newly reconstructed, even larger schools. So, in other words, before the new Zervis is bursting at the seams, we ought to have a plan for the, as someone suggested, we call it the Paul Edward Coletti Elementary School in Upper Falls. Anyway, that was a suggestion that was made on the last
Service
show.
is a beautiful school.
It's, and I'm in the district and delighted at that, but nonetheless, the question is, so that we're not in reactive crisis mode
Right.
when the pendulum inevitably swings back to a higher student population in the city.
Right.
So that was another suggestion, and I'll probably remember 6 more. I'm going to try to write them all down and literally send them to the mayor, because I think around this table we've had so many good ideas. Who knows? Maybe some of them will come to fruition.
My
Greer.
big ones are already covered, and so I'm not going to waste any more time trying to dream up another one, because I really like basically it's the roads and the fiscal crisis we currently have in our budget. Boy, I don't want to detract from those two. So if you're going to keep adding lists, I'll let you add, because I'm not going to add to
Okay.
them.
Well, I'm gonna watch this, and I'm gonna write down these so I don't forget. But
So
and
living at once
sidewalks.
wasn't enough?
Sidewalks was the other one. Sidewalks was a big one. People
Fixing
talked about.
sidewalks or clearing them?
Fixing, maintaining, and having the city clear and not rely on the hodgepodge of some people plow a little.
Well,
some
so,
people
I just did a survey on this.
Okay.
And got a lot of responses, and predominantly more people, not everyone, but more people, probably like half said they'd rather have people be fined. And then probably a quarter said they would want the city to take it over. And then a quarter had other ideas.
So I would suggest that if people were educated about what happens in places where it snows a lot, if you look at what happens in Montreal, what happens in Minnesota, you find that if you invest in the right equipment, a municipality can clear snow at a fraction of the cost of what it costs individual homeowners. You think about it. You think about the environmental impact of the truck going around to a few different houses,
Right.
comes in, plows a little bit of driveway. Maybe the guy comes out, shovels a little bit.
But
of
would they do my street a dead end? Would the city literally do every sidewalk?
Well, there are different levels of.
Because we already do 80 miles of sidewalks. The city
Yes.
does.
Indeed, but
Yeah.
we have 600 miles of sidewalk.
I'm
So the
just saying
question-
it's not,
Well, we
you
have
know.
300 miles of street. Not every street has sidewalk on both sides, but there is a big difference between doing 80 and doing even 150, because
Right.
there's a number of arterials and school routes that the city doesn't do, and all it takes is one patch of sidewalk that's on
But
a
that's
school.
that's not having us do the whole city. That is expanding what the city does for school, walk to school routes, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
My
Or
question is-
high pedestrian places. I'm going to add to that. When we had this whole sidewalk debate before, is we're so focused on where the sidewalks are going to get plowed, and I would say that their bigger problem is we need to look at how the sidewalks are being maintained, because I will tell you, the sidewalks.
Massive potholes.
Yeah, the sidewalks are not covered with snow way more days than they're covered with snow. And we're spending so much effort trying to solve what happens when it actually snows, when we've got a problem all year long.
Thanks, global warming.
Yeah, we have a problem all year. Yeah, forget it. I'm not even going there. But
Well, I'm saying that's why they're not going.
there's a lot bigger problems, because just West Newton alone. Okay, you try walking down we live so close to the city center. You try walking down in major sidewalk ways. You're tripping over roots. You're tripping over.
Right, and the city does, to their credit, the DPW does have a plan to be addressing more and more of the sidewalks. Which, just like you said, will and sometimes mean taking away trees that the roots have been destroying the
But
sidewalks.
we have a third topic and only a few minutes left. So let's get to it, which is, Emily, I understand that you're concerned about the environment.
A little bit.
And,
Really?
and you have a proposal.
You're welcome, because you also live in it.
That's right. The specific, you're concerned about the environment in many ways, and I know you've worked on electricity aggregation and a number of other things, but there's a docket item I understand that you're working on now.
Yeah, so Amy
for-
Sangiolo and Barbara Brussel-Glazer and I last session docketed a sort of resolution/requirement that would have Newton commit to reaching 100% renewable energy, not just for the city, but also, well, actually that one might have been just for the city, but now I want to expand it.
To Newton residents
To
and
help
businesses?
residents and businesses as well, because if you look at the various reports that have been put together by climate scientists, if we don't get to at least 80% reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, it probably need to be more than that and faster than that, we're really going to be in a lot of problems.
So 100% renewable energy by the city government and the businesses and nonprofits and residents who live in the city by when?
So different sectors would have different deadlines, and we're still working out what all the deadlines are.
Would the city lead the way and do it first, the municipal government?
Well, it's going to be different strategies for different. But anyway, it's a lot easier to go renewable for our electricity, for example. It's a bit harder when it comes to transportation. Basically, that's electrifying, moving from petroleum to electricity for your vehicles, and then having your power grid be decarbonized, so to get the pollution out of your grid and then be plugging into a cleaner grid. And with heating,
Which is not local.
Regional, right? Or
Right.
well, yeah, it's regional. It's not. It wouldn't all just be in Newton. It wouldn't be like solar panels, cutting down Webster Woods and putting solar panels up, anything like that. And then for heating, you'd want to do the same thing.
That'd
Basically,
be a bad environmental.
that would be very bad.
And that actually is somewhat of an issue because
Well, there is that, especially in Western Mass. There are areas where
solar farms, or
you have trees like virgin forest being cut down for solar farms, which is not exactly what you want. So it's not really an issue here in Newton, though.
right.
And then for
really
heating,
don't have
again, you do want to be moving more and more to electricity. Basically, the future is going to be everything on electricity, and then electricity powered by solar and wind and tidal and geothermal and all that sort of thing. But the costs for all of those are not necessarily reasonable yet, and the technologies are not necessarily commercialized yet for all those. So that's why you're not going to be able to do it all tomorrow. But I do believe strongly that we want to be setting deadlines, whether it's 2030 for this, 2035 for that, because that will force us to think about, well, what are we going to do to get there? And I strongly believe that with this kind of a resolution, other cities and towns across Massachusetts will be looking
So
to Newton as a
I'm going to give
model.
the rest of the panel the opportunity to say that they hate the planet and want it to be destroyed, if that's true. No? Okay, we have common ground. No, just kidding. Sorry. Go ahead,
No, we have
George.
2 minutes left.
No, I'm going to put on my conservatives hat again.
Okay.
Because the conservatives board has very much discussed this specific proposal, and the concern there is that if you set a deadline that's unrealistic,
people
it
will
won't
just
mean
not-
anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are looking to see why, how can we be sure that these are realistic deadlines? And I don't know.
So
the
I'm going to
answer
give an
that question.
example, and I'm going to just cut you off because we're moving quickly. If you compare the cost of solar panels now to when Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, 1/250th of the cost. People have no
per
idea.
kilowatt hour. And that's a good note to end on. Because
All right, let's take
and
this
George
up-
and George did
Let's
work
take
for
this
Jimmy
up next
Carter
time.
too.
Let's
Yes,
take
we'll
this up
take it
next
on-
time. I'm
and-
going to come back on the show.
I did, you're right.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Okay,
My only
well,
2
well,
cents
well,
about
well,
it is I would really support lead by example. I'm not a huge fan of the whole hit everybody over the head with this thing.
So the city government should do it first, in your
In my opinion, if they're going to do it,
Okay.
the city's
Well,
got to do it first.
Obviously, we could fill 2 hours, we could fill 12 hours with this panel. We could do an all-night show. I'm sure our families would be glad to see us in the morning. But anyway, thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks,
Thanks,
George. Thanks very much, Greer. Thank you to our wonderful crew. Thanks to Will, first time directing Common Ground, fantastic job. And thanks, Eric, and thanks, Arthur, and thank you at home for watching. And please join us again next time. Our next live show is March 8th, when we'll try to find just a wee bit more common ground.
Imagine a time when no one person has brain disease. Imagine a time when no one person has Parkinson's disease. Or no one person has MS. No one person is debilitated by a stroke. And no family suffers the tragedy of Alzheimer's. Some of the best minds in America are doing more than imagining. The American Brain Foundation is seeking to find cures, where life without brain disease isn't just something we can imagine, it's something we can know. Help us get there.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes, and you can do it here. So what are you waiting for? Just go to the site.